So I'm Andy North. I'm a director leading the IT internal audit services we provide to our infrastructure and public sector clients. I'm really pleased to be able to introduce this morning's session on cloud. So as we've already heard from Dimitrios, cloud is a radically different way of delivering IT services with plenty of new challenges, such as new technologies, ways of managing suppliers, requiring completely new skills and ways of working for the IT teams that we audit. But of course, cloud also brings a need for us as internal auditors to help organizations to clearly understand the associated risks and how they can be best controlled. So I'm absolutely delighted to be joined today by Alina Timofeeva. Alina is a member of our cloud assurance team. She's recently been recognized with some really impressive national awards. We're really proud to say that she's a Women in Technology Rising Star and was recently named in the top 100 women in technology. So I'll hand over to Alina, and please feel free to submit any questions in the chat and we'll pick that up on as many as we can at the end. Over to you, Alina.
Thank you very much, Andy. Hello, everyone. Thanks for listening to us today and being so patient. I do want to say that we have a cloud assurance team and we are leading within KPMG globally. So based on our experience of working with you and your peers, we have selected the most pertinent examples which we would like to discuss today. But before we start, I wanted to make it more interactive. There is a very short poll which essentially is asking you, what are the key challenges you are facing when auditing cloud? Is it perhaps the changing regulatory landscape, or the fact that you don't have a one-fit cloud framework, or maybe it's a limited cloud SME knowledge in your team? I'll get back to the answers of the poll later in my presentation. Now, as Andy mentioned, there are a lot of opportunities which cloud is bringing. There are the business benefits, the new revenue streams. But at the same time, we need to really think about the risks. And what is important about cloud is not just a technology. It's the new ways of working, the new operating model. And this is why when you audit cloud, think about risks holistically across the people, the processes, and technology. If you go live with a big amount of open cloud risks, you may be exposed to cyber attacks, loss of data, and subsequently a regulatory challenge, or perhaps loss of your customers or loss of customer trust. Now, for today, we have selected 3 key stories where we saw things perhaps go wrong, and we want to talk you through the key risks and the key ways you as an internal audit may want to look at this. The 3 stories are around exit management, clear roles and responsibilities, and cloud strategy. I will start with the exit management. Now, exit management is quite important for financial services given the latest regulation and ops resilience, third party, and cloud. But even for non-financial services organizations, it's equally important because the board is going to be asking you the questions. Something like, how have you ensured portability? If you were to exit, do your tools, say in AWS, are they compatible with the tools in GCP? Have you thought about your data center strategy? Say if you had to move on premise and you needed to use data centers, would you have the budget? How does moving on premise or to another cloud provider align with your people and operating model? But more broadly, think about exit as your lifeboat. How will you ensure that you are proactively monitoring it? How do you ensure that when things go bad, you know what to do? The key risk here is around the disruption to the provision of services. This could impact the continuity and the quality of your end-to-end service to your customers. What is really, really important? Exit, it's not just an exit clause in your contract. It's so much more. It's a playbook, it's a mechanism for you which is not just a paper exercise. So I really encourage you, when you think about the audits, think about exit. Think whether there are alternative options identified. You could be moving to on-premise, or you could be moving to another provider. Think about transition states. Really, have they been identified? Have they been properly tested? Have the stakeholders been briefed in terms of what they need to do? And more importantly, think about it. If you had to exit, how would you do it in a controlled manner with minimum disruption to your customers? My next example is around roles and responsibilities. Now, in every internal audit I've seen, there is always some sort of a challenge with roles and responsibilities. So it's nothing new here. But the thing around cloud is a little bit different, which is why I want to highlight it today. Imagine you had a security breach. You moved from on-premise to cloud. So who is going to actually be held responsible for this? Is it your engineers, your cyber team, your cloud provider, or somebody else? And if I go back to my example of the exit management, if you need to exit, who is responsible? And basically, how will they know what they need to know? How will they keep informed? What is interesting, in our experience, we never actually saw any organization do the cloud RACI correct and right from the start. Now, it may not worry you today, but when things go wrong, in particular if there is a possibility of exit, this is when you will see that this is really, really required. The key risk here is around not being able to understand the shared responsibility model, but also perhaps not having enough right people to challenge the cloud adoption, and hence exposing yourself to wider cloud risks, which could be around security and data loss, etc. One example I want to highlight is around SaaS. I remember I was auditing SaaS, and the high-risk issue was around roles and responsibilities. What is interesting, there were a few other high-risk issues, and roles and responsibilities was the root cause for most of them. The reason I want to touch upon this today is I'm sure SaaS audits are on your plan. So specifically in that situation, there was no clear owner of SaaS. When we wanted to issue a notification, we didn't actually know who to issue it for in the start. There was no clear definition of what is SaaS. It was quite hard to identify the end-to-end population of SaaS. And more importantly, there were no clearly defined roles and responsibilities. And what this practically meant, there was a reliance on different teams, cyber team, procurement, third party, but ultimately the organization left itself exposed to a variety of risks. Perhaps the right SMEs were not involved, and it was very hard to look at the end-to-end risk management of SaaS at a vendor and service level. As a result, the risk management was disjointed, and this led to a number of other high-risk findings. To summarize, roles and responsibilities is something you may want to consider as part of your audit. And if they are not in place or not operating effectively, this could lead to wider challenges. Cloud strategy. This is my third topic. The key here is really, how do you ensure that you make your cloud transformation last? The key risk here is around missing out on the opportunity to maximize the strategic benefits around cloud. According to Gartner, 3 out of 4 organizations don't have a fit-for-purpose cloud strategy. Now, the root cause for this is the fact that organizations think about cloud as a technology. But it's so much more than this. And actually, if you want to make your cloud transformation last, you need to have a compelling business case, a business driver. It could be something like you need to exit a data center. And if you need to do it within 2 years, then you go to cloud more quicker and more like a lift and shift. Or it could be the pure cost play. Or it could be something that you really want to transform your operations, and cloud is a way and a mechanism for you to do it. What I really want to call out here is that strategy is not just a piece of paper. It's essentially a mechanism for you to define what are the business drivers, how will you measure them, how will you track them, how do you ensure that the cloud transformation lasts. And as an auditor, I would encourage you to look at the following things. Is there a cloud strategy? If there is a cloud strategy, then do you have a clear success criteria in place? Is it continuously monitored and looked at and reported? Do you have a buy-in from both the IT and the business? Does the cloud strategy align to both IT and business? More importantly, you need to ensure that as you track these business benefits and opportunities, they are actually transforming your organization. And I think I'm just seeing the results of the poll, and they seem to be very, very conclusive, with 90% of you calling out that there is no single golden standard for comprehensive cloud solutions. And this is something which we will cover in the Q&A. But just one thing I want to touch upon right now is we ourselves, we struggled with not having this golden standard. So it took us a couple of years to create something internally, which we use both for KPMG internally, but also we support our clients with this. So it's quite an important exercise. Now, I just want to call out the key takeaways for today. There are 3 of them. 1, cloud is not just a technology. It's a new operating model, new ways of working. And this is why when you have the audit, think about risks across people, processes, and technology. 2, think about the roles and responsibilities, in particular, the shared responsibility model. It's very important for you to drill into it, because you may find out that it's a root cause for wider challenges. And 3, if you think about the cloud strategy and exit management, this is not just a paper exercise. So really consider it as part of your audit to ensure that you as an organization, you get the business benefits you set out in the start, and you also get the continuity and quality of the end-to-end service for your customers. And now I'm open to questions.
Thanks, Helena. Fantastic presentation. And if only we could see the audience writing all those notes to plan their next cloud audit. So we do have a few questions that are coming through, but please, continue to submit them through the channel as you like. So the first one that we got here is that if you audit cloud, and more specifically the risk management area, what would be your key considerations to look for?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think from my experience, there are 4 key things which you may want to consider. So number 1, think about the business and IT risk for cloud. So just based on my presentation, the IT and the risk team, the IT and the business teams, they will be working together to enable them to get these business benefits. Sometimes we see that IT risk teams get involved, but so the business teams that own the service, perhaps not so much, or they get involved like too late in the process. So this is the first area to understand. The second area is around delivery versus run risk. And essentially, if you go live, you will have certain risks, which you may decide, to accept. But it's more importantly, how do you look at the risk in the aggregation? And this is quite difficult to do it because you may have different applications going at different points in time live. And sometimes people look at it purely at application, but not holistically. And I think an important thing here is how do your senior committees, cloud assurance group, but even higher, the board, for example, how do they see assurance that you understand the cloud risks holistically in your organization in an aggregated way, and you actually know what is the risk that cloud brings? And I think the third point is around the board. So the board, in principle, they need to be engaged, and they need not just to get a board paper and read it, but they need to be challenging the organization that they are accepting, or perhaps they're mitigating the risks. And the last point, I've seen quite a lot being challenged in particular by the regulator. It's just ensuring that you have all three lines of defense who have done their risk reviews in a timely manner. You may want to choose or sequence how you do these reviews, but in principle, it's important to show that you have sufficient skill set to challenge the first line, and actually your opinion needs to be considered, fed back, and obviously the organization needs to work on the back of it.
Yeah, so absolutely. So I see that as well. So cloud and transition to cloud, not just about technology, is it? It's about, really engaging the organization. It's such a significant change that it really needs to be escalated all the way through to the board. That's great. And I've got another question here then. So at what point do you think, Alina, it would be best for internal audit to get involved in a cloud program?
Yes. So I'll give a couple of examples. One is the client we are working at, and they are very early in their cloud maturity stage. So essentially, they are defining the cloud framework, defining the key foundations, building their center of excellence. And I think what was very significant, we brought internal audit into this discussion very early in the process, along with the first line of risk and the second line of risk. So that's the first example, which I think is a positive. You may not want to audit everything straight away, but you at least need to understand what are the key risks, how is the first line addressing it, what is the type of maturity it is in at the moment. And then subsequently, you can have more drill down when the organization is more mature into, for example, data on cloud or SaaS or containerization. That's my first example. And the second one is probably where internal audit didn't get involved early in the process. In fact, they didn't get involved to the very last minute, and it brought a few challenges. So the client, essentially, they were moving material workloads to the cloud, and they have noted this to the regulator. What was interesting, the regulator did come back and did probe, to see the evidence of what are the different risk assessments that were done and all the challenge from the board and from three lines of defense. And at that point in time, the internal audit didn't actually do any assessment, so they had to very frantically do it within, 2-3 weeks of the response to the regulator, which of course could have been done more proactively.
Yeah, and I think that's a general point for me anyway. In most sort of technology change programs, it's important that internal audit gets involved early, upfront, helps the organization to move into a position where it's set to succeed. So, I think that's absolutely right. So we've got another question here. How do we get assurance on the activities of cloud service providers?
Yeah, and that's a good question. And I think it was a similar question for Rohit as well when he was talking.
Yeah.
I mean, to be honest, it's quite challenging. So there are different ways I've seen organizations address it. I've seen more bigger organizations actually to go and test the cloud provider themselves. It was still, not a proper end-to-end test. It was just going to one of the data centers and seeing the controls, right? And one of the clients, they used a third-party management framework, which is similar to what Rohit was sharing. And the second one, they had a detailed review from the second line of risk into the cloud provider, one of the cloud providers they were using. I mean, the second way, there are discussions in general that there could be pooled audits of cloud providers. I haven't practically seen this. I have seen this as discussions, and I think it's a very good idea in case that was possible. And the third thing is about SOC reports. So SOC reports, they're quite high level. And we've been having a discussion in the past with one of the cloud providers around this. And they were thinking, how to enrich the SOC reports and actually give the detail to their clients to the level which they would find appropriate rather than keeping to the normal structure. So I think these are the key things.
Okay, thanks, Alina. So I can see a lot more questions, but unfortunately, I think it's time for us to wrap up on this one. So thanks again.